This is Democracy Now! I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez.
We turn now to look at the Trump administration's deadly treatment of transgender asylum seekers in immigration prisons after a transgender woman died after being released from ICE custody Saturday. Johana Medina, a 25-year-old transgender asylum seeker from El Salvador, died at an Paso, Texas hospital this weekend after spending 7 weeks in immigration jail. According to several LGBT groups and advocates who knew her, Medina had sought medical treatment for nearly 2 months for complications related to HIV/AIDS before finally being transferred to the hospital last week. She died 4 days later.
Johana Medina is believed to be the second transgender migrant to die in or after being released from ICE custody since Trump became president. The other is Roxsana Hernández Rodriguez, a 33-year-old Honduran transgender woman who died while in ICE custody in May of last year. An autopsy revealed she was physically assaulted prior to her death. For more, we're going to Phoenix, Arizona, where we're joined by Isa Noyola. She's deputy director at Mijente, the former deputy director at the Transgender Law Center, and a transgender and immigrant rights activist herself. We welcome you to Democracy Now! Isa, can you describe what you understand were the circumstances of her death?
The circumstances of Johanna are the same circumstances that so many trans women inside immigration detention centers are facing, which is cruel and inhumane treatment and human torture. And so we understand that Immigration Customs Enforcement has seen trans women, immigrant trans women, as disposable. We see it through the ways that they're placing trans women through administrative segregation and also denying them medical care and medical treatment. And Johanna is just another example, another extreme story of so much loss and so much pain that someone has endured, even after the long and arduous journey of arriving to the border. And so Johanna has left her hometown with so much hope of El Salvador, her country, and she had so much hope for a better life, to live her life fully, authentically as a trans Latina immigrant woman, and only to be met with violence at the border and discrimination, and even more violence inside detention facility.
I'm wondering if you could talk of your experience with refugees who are trying to get into the United States. One group in Honduras, Catrachas, which is a lesbian feminist organization, has estimated that between 2013 and 2017, they found 34 cases of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and trans people who had been deported back to Honduras and then were later killed. And what the situation is for trans folks, especially in Honduras and Central America right now.
The climate for trans people around globally is alarming. The level of violence has always existed. It is now recently being studied, researched, and documented by the media. But being in the trans community and doing this work for so many years, doing local immigrant rights work for trans people in San Francisco at Ela para Translatinas, we always understood that the violence surrounds our daily lives, violence surrounds the community, and one of the main push factors and reasons why trans people migrate, why trans people globally are seeking refuge, are seeking safety, are seeking a better place to live their lives and to have a chance, have a possibility of what everyone else has, what everyone else is living in terms of their dreams, in terms of their having access to healthcare, having access to housing, having access to education, having access to community, right? And so detention and immigration Immigration Customs Enforcement have been hell-bent on denying basic human rights to our community. And so the phenomena of violence and murder is not a new thing. There's no uptick. It has always existed. Now there's an acknowledgement of it. But the reality is that Central American trans people, that queer LGBT plus folks have faced have faced in their countries are the same that are experiencing in Mexico, in Asia, in all over the continent of Africa. And so we understand that the violence is one of the main factors of why trans people are marginalized, why trans people are placed in vulnerable situations where they have very limited choices. And so when you understand that then there's a systemic issue involved when you get to the border, right, and then you're returned back, people are still going to find possibilities to exist and to live.
A report released last month by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists revealed that since 2012, ICE has used solitary confinement as a routine punishment for thousands of immigrants and asylum seekers locked up in immigration jails across the country. Immigration officers repeatedly used isolation cells to punish gay, transgender, and disabled immigrants for their identities. This is a clip from an NBC interview with two trans women who were held in isolation while in ICE custody. In this clip, we hear from Dulce Rivera, a trans woman from Honduras who was kept in solitary for 11 months while in ICE custody and attempted suicide. But first, Jocelyn Mendez, a trans woman from Nicaragua who was put in solitary twice for a total of 9 days.
And
well, the truth is, what I went through in there is something I don't even wish on my worst enemy. It's horrible. I felt like I really didn't know what was going to happen to me. I felt afraid. I felt that I couldn't even breathe. And at the beginning, I began to scream and scream where they locked me up. I told them, release me. I can't stand it. I am short of breath.
I asked them for help. I told them, I need to see a psychologist. I need to see a psychologist. And what happened is that the guard's response was no. So then I decided to tie a piece of blanket to the window above. And I completely covered the door outside so that no one was seeing what was happening inside the room. I made a lasso. I hung myself. So it's something psychological, mental, that it affected me in being in that place. So disgusting and horrible.
That's Dulce Rivera, and before that, Jocelyn Mendez, describing their experience in solitary. Isa, as we wrap up, I wanted to ask you about Johanna's death. She was held in an all-male detention facility, and if you could describe these facilities that you've entered and seen and what you're calling for.
I want to clear something up also. I just want to be very, very clear that Immigration Customs Enforcement is responsible for the death of not just Johana Medina and Roxsana Hernández, but also Victoria Arellano in 2007, who was handcuffed to her bed pleading for her life, and it was an HIV-positive trans woman. So ICE, Immigration Customs Enforcement, has to be held accountable for the deaths of these trans women and all the deaths that happen inside detention facilities, and Customs Border Patrol has to be held accountable for the deaths that are occurring at the border. Johanna, her experience that she had at the Otero facility is one that exists, the experience that exists in all of the 200+ facilities that exist around the country. And that is one of human rights violations and denial of access to medical treatment and to basic human dignity. The ways that trans women are classified by Immigration Customs Enforcement is based on genitalia, is based on a classification that does not align with our community, that is dehumanizing us from the very beginning. And Immigration Customs Enforcement does not make any excuses about that. They are very clear and adamant that trans people inside detention are not human beings, and they've demonstrated that time and time again. And Johanna, her experience is one of many of trans people who have been placed at whether it's administrative segregation or whether it's with in the male housing units, right, where sexual assault is experienced, and one of the highest levels for trans people inside detention.
Isa Noyola, I want to thank you for being with us. Deputy Director at Mijente, the former Deputy Director of Transgender Law Center, transgender and immigrant rights activist, speaking to us from Phoenix, Arizona.